Quick question. Who's familiar with artistic movements? Basically, it's the idea that any genre of art evolves out of another. There are a lot of examples of this, but I'm going to use architecture. Architectural movements like Brutalist and Modernist architecture evolved from the Art Deco movement, and Gothic architecture evolved from the earlier classical architecture. The reason I bring this up is because this is what science fiction is. When Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, nobody called it science fiction. It was a mix of fantasy and speculative fiction. And really, those two principles are the basis of science fiction, and since Frankenstein, people have created millions of stories that sit between these two extremes that we collectively call science fiction. Science fiction isn't a genre, and it's not a setting. It's an artistic movement that began in literature before spreading to film, music, television, and every other form of art imaginable. Today, I want to start on a journey. I want to explore the history of this movement in my most beloved medium, film. I want to see how it all started and how it evolved. And I don't think there's anywhere better to start than at the very beginning. So let's go back to 1902, and the first science fiction film ever made, George Méliès' Le Voyage dans la Lune. Le Voyage dans la Lune, or as it's known in English, A Trip to the Moon, was produced in only 3 months and cost 10,000 francs. I wish I could give you a conversion on that, but I'm not very well versed in dead currency. According to Milies, most of the cost came from the elaborate movable sets he built for the film, as well as the alien costumes, both of which I found very impressive for the time. Milies, who also played the main character, cited the works of Jules Verne as his inspiration for the film, though several other possible inspirations have been proposed in the years since. Milies had a propensity for pioneering special effects in filmmaking, and this film continues that trend. The zoom that leads to the iconic shot of the man in the moon being hit by the astronomer's capsule was created by using a rope and pulley to bring an actor covered in black velvet towards the bulky camera. The film was released in 1902 and was a huge success in France, as well as the United States, Canada, and Germany. However, many American distributions were pirated. Thomas Edison was actually one of the main culprits, and his rampant piracy eventually put Milies out of business. You know, I don't want to get sidetracked by this, so let's just move on to the discussion of the plot.
There's a starman waiting in the sky.
Le Voyage dans la Lune begins at a fancy observatory/lecture hall. Our main character, one Professor Barbenfoulier, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce all these French names, enters and begins discussing how to travel to the moon. A brief fight breaks out, and then Professor Barbecue manages to convince 5 other astronomers, who I don't care to name, to volunteer for the journey, and they start building a cannon that will shoot a capsule at the moon. They all pile into the capsule and are loaded into the cannon by some Marines who shoot them off to the moon. When they get there, they watch an Earthrise and go to sleep before being driven underground by a snowstorm. Underground, they find a cave filled with mushrooms and encounter a race of insectoid aliens called Selenites. Selenites? I think I'm saying that right. They are taken to the royal court where Professor Barbed Wire kills the alien ruler.
Look at Randy Orton slithering.
Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out!
Here's the cover.
The group then flees back to the capsule pursued by the Selenite army. They manage to capture one before dropping off the edge of a cliff back to Earth, where they are hailed as heroes. This film is interesting to me because it feels much more like a stage play. The camera is usually focused at one angle, similar to what it would be like sitting in a seat at a theater, and I would guess that this was a cost-saving measure. Early cameras in film were expensive, and while I couldn't find evidence for this, I would guess that trying to get multiple shots of a scene would be impractical. That being said, it's not as though this film is unimpressive. The mechanical sets are wonderful. I find the Earthrise scene to be a personal highlight for me, and the set artist's interpretation of the moon's surface with scraggy rocks and tall jutting pillars, as well as the lush fungal overgrowth of the planet's caves, are locations that would be used in later works of science fiction all across different mediums. There are actually several elements of this film that would become science fiction staples. I previously mentioned the vistas of the moon, but the concept of insectoid aliens and an extraterrestrial empire are both familiar science fiction concepts brought to the screen for the first time. Also, this film has some weirdly accurate predictions about real-life space travel. I mentioned Earthrise before, and it is a real phenomenon, although it's certainly an easier prediction. More interesting to me, though, is the idea of a small capsule propelled at high speed being the ideal way to travel to the moon, because that's basically how we got to the moon in real life. Sure, it's a little over-exaggerated, but it's close enough. So despite its many fantastical elements, some of the predictions in this film did manage to come true. Sort of. If you squint at it, I guess. If you're a huge fan of science fiction or a film, I would recommend watching this one. It's really important to the history of both, and it's also just, fun. It may be a silent film, but there's a certain charm to its simplicity that I would really recommend. Thank you for watching this history of science fiction. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, and if you have a recommendation for other films I should watch, leave them in the comment section below.